But they're still going on though. It is no secret that the Disney live action remake genre is a slowly deteriorating breed. As each new Disney remake installment comes out, they just seem to get worse and worse over time, with this year being the new record lows of Snow White and Lilo and Stitch, even though they've made all sorts of box office successes anyway. At the time of recording this, Lilo & Stitch is around $775 million. It might very well breach $1 billion, and because of that alone, the corporation will probably keep spitting them out, but God, is it not more than enough time to stop. And it's been time to stop ever since we had Tim Burton's bleak version of Alice in Wonderland in 2010. But then with that movie making over $1 billion because it was a 3D movie coming out just after Avatar, and ever since, Disney have just not let this trend die, no matter how much it seems to be actively denting their reputation. Disney's live-action remakes have been a significant part of the studio's strategy to reimagine its animated classics, to the extent that that is exactly how they brand them. Reimaginings. And what delightful efforts we have seen, from good to predominantly mediocre to outright bad. And of course, there's nothing anywhere close to great. And even with the good ones by Disney, they always come with the asterisks of, well, obviously, it'll never touch the original. But, la 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 la. But either way, especially with the likes of DreamWorks now dipping their toes in a much more restricted, faithful way that, at least on my end, is getting a little bit more positively received, because it's not breaking the initial movie and pasting over an animator's work and a writer's masterpiece. Let's go through each of the live-action Disney remakes over the times and see just how far we've fallen from the start. Not that it's necessarily a perfect start, as we begin with Alice in Wonderland from 2010, the movie that supposedly kicked this all off, except it didn't. I was not a fan of this movie personally, but I know it has some fans, and a big part of that may well be because, shock horror, it is not a copy and paste remake. Weirdly enough, it actually acts as a sequel to the original story, and with a lot of stylistic choice behind it, with an actual creative involved in the form of Tim Burton. And with how much money it made as well, it does leave you wondering what could have been if the other remakes followed a similar suit of more radically springing off of their original stories, giving us something more unique, as well as stylistically making it impactful and artsy, as opposed to so flat and corporate that later Disney live-action musicals end up becoming. This was at least an attempt to take things in a different direction, though ironically it just led to a timeline of repasting the same stories again and again and again. But before you think Tim Burton was out here making original choices with his remakes, just wait until we get to Dumbo later. Still, next is Maleficent from 2011, the poster child for let's look at the story again, but realize the villain wasn't so bad after all. And this movie just feels like this was Angelina Jolie going, I want to play that character, and then Disney going, sure. This just isn't good. And it's a shame, because this is another one where they did try and make something different. They were still trying to work out what they were going for before they realized easy was the easiest profitable option. We're still in the days here where Disney are yet to realize we can literally just copy and paste the original movie and don't need to go to these lengths of twisting up the story to make money. Even here, where they're being lazy, they were still terrible. Then you've got Cinderella from 2015. With half a decade later from the start, for a lot of people, this is the good one. Kind of where I would imagine the real live actions begin. The definitive article, the well-reviewed hit that basically encouraged Disney to double down. I think it's fine, but ultimately resent it for the path that it took us down. It does a decent job of updating the story and making interesting creative decisions in fleshing it out. You know, it's got Kenneth Branagh directing it now, which I'm sure helped as well, making it look competent. Again, I'd say it's good. Not great, but very much the classic, simple, whelming kind of Disney live-action remake. Then you come to The Jungle Book in 2016, arguably maybe one of the better ones, possibly one of the best. We had two solid efforts in a row, with Christopher Walken as a giant, creepy version of King Louis, never forgetting that. However, another shake of the head for me, because this would end up being the precursor to the Lion King remake. They even pulled Jon Favreau straight from this movie into Lion King, and then to Star Wars. And he's in Marvel. The mouse has a grip on that boy. Speaking of boys, the thing that really makes this stand out against Lion King is that you have the live-action Mowgli as a reference point to appreciate the genuinely amazing visual effects. And he really sells the movie, despite the fact that he's basically running around an empty green screen room in his underpants. Moving forwards, we have Alice Through the Looking Glass from 2016 as well, the forgettable sequel to the first one, with Borat as a clock villain. This one just flopped, despite hopes that it could get away with being bad and make $1 billion, because that was what the first movie did. But no, it failed. And perhaps with it died the concept, at least early doors, of making more sequel original content based off of these live action remakes, since apparently they can only be one and dones, keep it safe and simple. But either way, it's also not a great movie. Beauty and the Beast 2017 is another pretty classic, simplistic in its design, but never quite gonna hold up to the original. The third time it felt like they tried, just didn't work so well this time around. With the exception of Luke Evans as Gaston and Josh Gad by his side, the rest of this was a proper snooze fest for me personally. I think this was the first disappointment as well, as everyone had Cinderella and Jungle Book as the standard up to this point, and this wasn't either of those, and I don't think remakes in general will be from here. It was just fine. It was the point where fine became the aim at this point for Disney. Come round to The Lion King 2019, and here's an experiment that was interesting for the first 5 minutes. That opening sequence is truly a staggering feat of animation, which, by the way, is what it is. Animation. People still can't help themselves calling this a live-action remake. Other than the sunrise in the opening shot, everything you're looking at is a pixel, which is why it was incredible to watch, until you saw what it meant for the character animation, leaving the situation rolling around the uncanny valley and only looking slightly better than those talking animal movies where they edit the talking mouths onto them, getting these emotional and charismatic voice performances slapped onto faces that do not reflect that at all. And beyond that, I think this was the point where people cottoned on to, oh, this is literally the same movie. Some differences are in there, like making Scar less interesting as a villain, but this is when the shot for shot was becoming more apparent. And then, I'm remembering this era now, then comes Aladdin 2019. The one that looked destined to be terrible, but was actually okay. Again, I can't give this one the merits of greatness or anything close to that, particularly with Jafar perhaps being the worst translation of a villain in the bunch. I'm not familiar with the actor, but boy was that more wooden than Pinocchio, and that's saying something with his remake on the way. But I thought the big blue will in the house was going to be a lot more off-putting than it actually turned out to be. Maybe that's changed post-2022, mind you. But before that defining event, he was actually pretty entertaining, despite how cursed his blue CGI form looked. He actually made it his own instead of trying to compete with Robin Williams, which was definitely the smart play there. You had some great other talent in there, Naomi Scott as Jasmine with that new song that wasn't actually that bad, and there were some clear differences from the original story that made it more interesting. But yeah, Jafar sucked. And then there's Dumbo 2019. Hi again, Tim. Yeah, remember how I said last time he at least used some of his signature imagination and style to do something different with Alice in Wonderland? Yeah, that's not what we're in the business of here. You wouldn't know Tim Burton made this movie. I think that's the biggest loss here. This is very much the point where the directors are just sort of treating this as only a job for the big mouse house. It's the same story, some insignificant changes, just without any of the colorful expression of the original, nor even the gothic flair of the director. You seeing a pattern brewing? The only W I really can give is it not including the crows from the original. That's it. Well done, you weren't racist. This also marked the beginning of we're gonna do this on Disney Plus as well, being amongst the streaming service's debut originals. To be fair, I'd say its hollowness is an accurate reflection of a lot of Disney Plus original content, so well done guys, very thematic. Hey, yes, you've made it to the halfway mark of the video. Come subscribe if you haven't already, as we ramble more about animated movies and Disney as well. Thanks for joining along, back to the second half of the video. And for Mulan in 2020, this one really went full on, let's make it gritty and suck the joy out of it. They wanted to make Mulan a serious epic, when what people loved about the original movie were the songs, Eddie Murphy as the dragon, and the distinct characters. Yet that is all gone in this version. Perhaps in an effort to be culturally accurate, but if this is the result, maybe just leave it alone. For one, despite all that effort to be accurate and respectful, ultimately China declined to have it released over there anyway. This is one of the prime examples of just meddling a story and making a mess instead. Now Cruella of 2021 is a little bit of a different take for this one. Seems as they already remade the actual movies in the 90s with Glenn Close. And again, it's fine. Maybe even good. Largely in part to Emma Stone putting in a performance that could gun for an Oscar. And yet, you leave the movie not quite sure what they actually want to do with this character. It's better than Maleficent, but you still leave with that same feeling, So is she gonna be a baddie or not? Or is it gonna be another, here's why she's not so bad after all kind of trope? The woman who took joy in skinning puppies to make a coat. Not such a bad egg in the end, apparently. It's confusing. And then for the real doom and gloom era, Pinocchio 2022 is potentially the worst of the bunch. Man, and they had Mr. Back to the Future doing this, Robert Zemeckis, with his golden gump Tom Hanks as Geppetto. And yet, you have the hollowest retelling you possibly could out of this movie. We had 3 versions of Pinocchio come out in 2022, and at least the cheap stinker of the bunch had the decency to have entertainment mixed in. This one, it just goes to hit the right story beats and do absolutely nothing with them. And Pinocchio himself looks so much like the classic one that you have to wonder what the point of this version even was. Not that the effects are good, they're not. And Jiminy probably ended up making children cry, so I'm starting to feel like these Disney Plus ones deserve their own category because they are something else. If a live action remake's going to Disney Plus, run is basically the motto here. And with so many of the elements of the original animated movie put into this movie and used later on in the likes of Snow White, it really does just feel like such a hollow format of just deleting animation for the superior format of cinema created by the very studio that platformed and built itself out of animation in the first place. But anyway, before we get to the conclusion, we have Peter Pan and Wendy from 2023. Remember this one? Once again, the same motto of run is very much the same for this one. And even as someone who's meant to be reviewing movies, it's mostly animation I do, so it explains it. I didn't watch this one. It looked terrible, and I didn't bother. And maybe that's a message that most of the audience had, because if you want us to trust a remake, maybe don't dump it on streaming. Thankfully, from here, it's all theatrical, as 2023 also brought us The Little Mermaid. And again, at this point, it's very much found its formula. This was fine. I guess it's one of the better remakes. Halle Bailey is great as Ariel and really nails the songs where she needs to. It's good. It's fine. I didn't even mind Melissa McCarthy as Ursula, even though they totally could have gotten like a drag queen involved or something. But beyond other performances being kind of flat, Javier Bardem is uncharacteristically boring as Trident, and Awkwafina as Scuttle is probably the one clunker in her bizarre amount of recent voice roles. This also got to the point where you're just kind of watching the movie and you can enjoy it in a bubble, but it just doesn't have the same magic in some form. Very sanded down and whelming. And as we get to 2024, if you like, you could define it as having no direct remakes of Disney animation classics. Instead, we had Mufasa, a prequel to a shot-for-shot remake. An interesting poke, I guess. Mufasa the Lion King had them trying to at least make the character designs more dynamic and expressive. It's nice to see there is slight learnings over a 15-year period of making these slightly more quality, but whilst it wasn't quite enough, I do have to acknowledge that at least some effort was made here to do something interesting. It still relies on nostalgia, but tries to do something new. That being said, it is just filled to the brim with disjointed narrative and weak emotional beats where they're really meant to hit. Any original songs flop in comparison to the original, and it seems so evidently clear that modern Disney writers just can't keep up to the standard of the older Disney classics. It still feels just derivative of the original Lion King and its themes, done poorly in the modern age because creating narratives are hard and Disney seems to be consistently failing. And all of these song numbers are unfortunately very much not Lin-Manuel Miranda's best work. And as we finally catch up to Snow White, what a treat of a disaster this one was. Trying to avoid controversy on multiple fronts, but ultimately walking straight into it in all possible places. If any Disney movie should have been left alone from a remake, it was this one. It's the original Disney movie. It's loaded with old-fashioned ideals that are fine in the context of the 1937 original, but are just weird when you try to either tiptoe around them, carry on with them, or just outright remove them. Case in point, the 7 creatures and the 7 bandits. They didn't know what to do here, so their solution was, let's go weird places with the story. That's it, just pad out the runtime, guys. And despite all of the controversy, the one thing that everyone agreed on was Gal Gadot didn't work as the queen. Weirdly, she almost did as the old woman with the apple, though. Truly an abysmal cinema experience, which is impressive considering this is what they'd made after 15 years of experience. A slow, deteriorating element of artistic non-existence, tone-deaf controversy handling, just for actually having the audacity to meddling with it anyway. and then just making such a confused product by the end of the day. And finally, wrapping up 2025, here we are back to Lilo and Stitch. It's here that my last glimmer of hope in this regime of unoriginality and commerce fully, properly died with the Disney remakes. I may well not even bother with the Moana remake that they're also making, and a Hercules one that's inspired by TikTok, even if the marketing looks good. It's clear that when it comes to these Disney live action remakes, they just don't hold on to the artistic core that made their originals great. They don't have the writers to keep up with the writers of the past, and either it is a straight copy and paste that ends up inferior to the original stories, or they make new original decisions that go so far off that it ruins the reputation of the source material it's based off of. There's no win-win situation, but it just keeps running again and again. I do wonder if there will genuinely be a point when Disney stops these remakes, because the fact of the matter is they still make too much profit, but now that there's the likes of rivaling live-action remakes in the form of DreamWorks and How to Train Your Dragon, a story that also works a lot better in the live-action adaptation format, it's relatively grounded, there's no campy dance musicals, and you can still feel the weight and emotional beats because the actors are allowed to act and the director is returning. It feels like that seems to be the way to best do an adaptation if you had to, and Disney have only learned how to get crappier and crappier. Maybe with a rival on the side, they will step up a bit and make something with a bit more artistic integrity, but I don't have very high hopes. Lilo and Stitch is also one of the worst Disney live-action remakes they've ever made, and now that they're happy doing a non-musical remake and one in the early 2000s, it's probably not long before the 3D animated stuff also will be done in live-action. Just cuz. But as far as I'm concerned, yeah, the live-action Disney remake is very much dying, and hopefully we'll see more of that manifest as we hear more of the public opinion over the years. I think Snow White and Lilo and Stitch have been a massive dent on that reputation, but I guess we'll just have to see where things roll out from there. For now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this whole ramble. I'd love to hear all your thoughts on more. What's the best Disney live action remake? And how could they possibly do one well? Or let's talk more How to Train Your Dragon. We've done reviews recently on Stitch and Dragon recently, so check those out if you're interested. But otherwise, I shall see you all in a little bit. Cheerio!